Hi, Dr. V.
Hi, thank you for joining us. We are going to go over a little bit about the Pfizer vaccine. Our main goal here is to kind of answer some questions and give, there's kind of a lot of information, so it's going to be kind of an overview about everything. But it's not only us today, we also have Sumaya, and we have Dr. Allen and Dr. Nazadinski, or Dr. Naz. So we'd like it to be kind of a panel discussion. So at any time, if Dr. Allen or Dr. Naz or Sumaya, if you want to add anything, or as far as your experience and things that have been happening, please feel free to interrupt us, or just let us know about your thoughts and feelings. If you agree with what we're saying, or if you have a different experience. But our goal here is to try and get everybody's questions answered. And there's kind of a lot of information, so we have a lot of information in the slides. But we're not going to kind of go through everything. We'd like to provide that information and make sure that all questions are answered. But we'd like to be as helpful as we can.
We got a lot of questions, so the slides. I hope the slides when our discussion will answer those questions today. And a lot of the slides we borrowed from.
All right, so these are really great slides. I think they provide a lot of information, and it's really the kind of information that that you'd want to know. I think if you're giving the shot or you're receiving the shot. So this is a little bit of information about the vaccine, and it's a lipid nanoparticle formulated mRNA vaccine encoding the spike protein. So spike protein, and here's a picture of it. Here's a picture of the coronavirus that we've all been seeing. And this is the spike protein here on the coronavirus, on the virus, and that it helps it to kind of get into the cells. So what happens is that this mRNA, so our body makes mRNA, and that's how it encodes protein. And so the shot has an mRNA particle that's inside. They call it a micelle. It's essentially a fat bubble. It's inside a fat bubble, and it helps it get into the cell and our own proteins to make the spike proteins. And then once the spike protein is made, we make antibodies against that spike protein. So it's actually, I think it's pretty genius. I think it's a great way.
This technology has been around for like over 20 years, and they have like done other studies in other vaccines like the cytomegalovirus. But this time around we were successful, and I get a lot of questions like, how did we get it done so fast? But this type of technology and knowledge has been here for a long time. But I think we got it done really fast in a year period. It's because we had funding, a lot of push. We got the companies got billions and billions of dollars to be able to do this type of research that takes years and years to raise that fund. So they were able to do it very successfully. So I think as far as, even though we did it in 1 year, the FDA and the pharmaceutical company have gone through all the proper channels and processes to get the vaccine to where we are today.
So, and this is what I was just saying. The mRNA vaccine takes advantage of the process that cells use to make protein, and so it's been rigorously tested. And just like Dr. D is saying, new but not unknown. It does not contain a live virus, so I think it's a very important point, because people will ask, can I get COVID from it? And the answer to that is absolutely not. You cannot get COVID from it. I think this is going to be, and we'll talk about, someone might have a little bit of a fever or not feel very well after getting the shot, and that's actually good because it means it's working, right? And I think people are going to worry about it and say, oh, I think I got COVID from it. But that's the important thing to know as healthcare providers and everything, is that you can't get COVID from it, and that's a good thing that your body is reacting to it.
And but to remember is, like, the mRNA only has the little spike protein, right? So in order to get COVID, you have to have the whole virus. So it's just the spike protein, and it's so cool. Like, it enters your muscle into the cell and just hangs out in the cytoplasm. It doesn't get into the nucleus. So one of the questions we get asked is like, is my DNA going to get changed? It doesn't, because your DNA is stored in the nucleus. mRNA, this message, only gets into outside of that. And we have these friendly guys called the ribosome. They see it, they start like making translated into a message, a protein, antigen. And then, you have B and T cells start working and making antibodies and start putting them in the memory. So in the future, if you get attacked by the actual virus, they know how to go get rid of the virus immediately. Now they have that memory. So it's a genius way of doing it, and it does not change your DNA at all.
Right, and not only does it not contain live virus, I wouldn't even say it contains dead virus, like
Exactly.
pieces of virus.
Exactly.
It just contains this little bit of information to make the spike protein. And so I think it's there's no concern there about actually getting.
It's kind of like computer programming. You have 0101, and then it puts out this is what it means. It's just like that. This is just a message, and it does not contain any of the virus. And it has been endorsed now by ACP. FDA has given emergency use authorization. And patients in this study have been will be followed for both Pfizer and Moderna. So that's good to know. And so far, we have the minimum requirement was they were supposed to follow for 2 months after they got the vaccine. How the I kind of want to share with you guys some of my experience. I actually signed up for Moderna vaccine trial. I just wanted to help. This was in August. So I got 2 different shots, 28 days apart. Moderna is pretty similar to Pfizer. They're both mRNA vaccines. And, after reading the data, just like what we're doing, I was very comfortable and I thought this was really cool. So I got the vaccine. I wasn't sure if I got the placebo or the vaccine, but with the first shot, I felt a little fatigue, and it went away, when I woke up. And then the second shot, 28 days later, I had some fever, fatigue, muscle ache that started. I got the vaccine at 8 a.m. By 8 p.m., I had some of these symptoms. And then the next day, I took a day off after the second shot because I had some fever, but not all other people had it, but I had that. And then it went away about 2 p.m. the next day. It completely resolved. I took some Tylenol and ibuprofen. So, I trust the vaccine. And afterwards, I actually got an antibody titers done. It was positive, so I'm pretty sure I was on the vaccine. And I've been doing really well since August. It's been 4 months.
Oh, it sounds like we're having some audio issues. Can people hear us okay? It sounds like it may be cutting out.
We're just going to switch.
Here, let's see if we can change the audio.
Can you?
There, can you hear us okay now? Is that did that resolve the audio issues? Much better.
Okay.
Oh, great. Okay,
Wonderful.
good.
Wonderful. Okay. Awesome.
Okay, good. We'll do that. Let's see. Okay, good. So you can hear us okay now? Oh, great. Okay.
So I was just sharing with you guys my experience. I got both vaccines in August, and I've been doing really well since then. We trust the science behind it, and I think this is the only way we could be able to crush the pandemic. And Dr. Horn is scheduled to get us today.
Yes, so I'm going to get my shot at 2 o'clock. So right when we're done with this, I'm going to go over and get my shot too.
Next slide.
So this is the Pfizer vaccine. It's 2-dose series administered intramuscularly 3 weeks apart. So 21 days apart. And really what they say is that, and just what it says here, that the second dose should be given, somewhere between 17 to 21 days later. Like other shots, it's okay to spread it out a little bit. And if you spread it out, they would still say it's a completed series. But they don't recommend shortening it. Really, they recommend 17 to 21 days.
And I think everybody has to commit to taking both doses. If you commit to taking the first, let's commit to taking the second one. And I think this maybe the small side effects that you might have outweighs the benefit of getting that vaccine.
Right. And one question that we've seen is, can you get one Pfizer and one Moderna?
Yeah. No.
And the answer is no. They are both mRNA.
Yeah.
And it's actually reassuring that 2 different studies did mRNA vaccines, and they both found, 95%, that they both work extremely well and found the same efficacy, and and that's really good, because that's what you want. You want the studies to be repeatable, and they are, except you can't use one instead of the other.
Yeah, it's not interchangeable, but
right.
It was fantastic to see almost 95% efficacy. And each study had over, I think one had 44,000 and the other had 30,000 participants. So they did a really good job recruiting a lot of patients to be able to study this vaccine.
Oh, and this is that question: interchangeability with other COVID-19 vaccine products. So, and this is just essentially saying we don't recommend taking one and then from one pharmaceutical company and then another from another pharmaceutical company. Just get 2, just as they were studied. Now, and this is another question that we've gotten: people with a history of COVID. So if you've had COVID in the past, what are the recommendations as far as, is it still okay to get the vaccine?
Yeah, so I think we're already starting to see rare, but people getting reinfection with natural infection. So they have had patients who have gotten COVID 4 months ago. Now they have gotten COVID again. So we strongly recommend, if there's vaccines available, even if you have had COVID-19 infection, to get the vaccine. Vaccine immunity must be much longer compared to natural immunity, because with natural infection, we're seeing reinfection. So, usually the reinfection happens within first 90 days. So let's say that you have 10 doses for your hospital and you have 15 people, and then other 5 have recently had their COVID-19 infection in their 90-day period. Maybe you give the first 10 people and then wait for the second shipment to give the other 5. But definitely, even if you have had the infection, get the vaccine.
Yes, and they don't recommend, any kind of testing to see if you had. So they don't recommend checking your antibodies and then deciding if you should get the shot, or doing a PCR test and deciding. Just, go ahead and get the shot.
There's a question: should they wait 90 days after their infection? No, they don't need to wait 90 days after their infection. If there's vaccine available, I would offer it to everybody. But if you just had your infection, don't get the vaccine at minimum for 10 days until you're symptoms free. If you had mild infection, wait 10 days. If you have severe COVID-19 infection, wait that period out. And once you're recovered, then get the COVID vaccine.
People with known or current, right.
John,
can I
just
add what you're saying,
something?
that reinfection is uncommon in 90 days after initial infection. With people with documented infection in the preceding 90 days may defer the vaccination. So they can, if desired.
If they want to.
Right,
but if you guys, it's going to be so hard to figure out who had infection, who
right.
didn't, what time. So in your hospital setting, if you have enough, and if your employee, healthcare worker wants the vaccine, I think we should be vaccinating everybody.
Right.
If you are currently in the infectious period and you're day 5 of your infection, don't get the vaccine until you feel better after day 10. But otherwise, everybody should be getting the vaccination.
Right. It's one of these things where, if it were me, I'm very pro-vaccine, and I would want it. If it ever says, if any of the recommendations ever say if desired, I would say yes in all of those situations, because really what you're doing is you're looking at the COVID vaccine, you're not looking at the COVID vaccine versus nothing. You're looking at COVID vaccine versus getting COVID.
Yeah.
And we've seen such bad cases. We don't need to see any more people dying from COVID. And really, the COVID vaccine, in my mind, there's no question there. It's going to be the vaccine every time. And people will say, well, yeah, I'm young and healthy, but if you're in healthcare or you're seeing these patients, a big part of it's not trying to not pass it on to other people and doing everything we can not to pass it on to either our family or our patients.
It doesn't matter how young and healthy we are. We have to think of the community and people around us. So we all have to get vaccinated in order for us to kind of get out of this pandemic.
And there's a question about placenta. So
that kind of leads to like the fertility question.
Right. And as far as fertility questions, there isn't anything to, I think some of these things are kind of circulating and people are picking them up and asking about it for good reason, because, their family members or their good friends are asking them about it. And I think, these are good questions. And so there's a question, have you heard anything about vaccine destroying the protein that is needed for placenta development? So I haven't.
No. So these are some of the false information that is kind of circulating in social media. So the placenta fertility, this vaccine does not affect your fertility or your placenta, placental development. So I think it's safe. For pregnant females, should they get vaccine? American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists released a statement this week, last week, ACOG, they said that pregnant females need to talk to their primary care provider or their OBGYN, especially frontline pregnant females, workers. And if they want the vaccine, they should get the vaccine. As you guys always know, whenever we do study, we never include pregnant females in any other stuff either for the long, So it's kind of, it's unfortunate, but the immune system works the same way if you're pregnant or not pregnant. And I think if you're pregnant and you get COVID, you're at a higher risk for bad things happening. Versus if you could protect yourself when you're pregnant with the vaccine, I think that's going to be really important. So pregnancy and lactation, if you're lactating mom, it's still okay to get the vaccine. If you have questions, please talk to your primary care doctor or OBGYN.
Right, and these studies, they exclude pregnant women, but there were women in the study that became pregnant and they are pregnant and they didn't know about it. So they actually follow those women and they'll follow those women to see, what happens with them. I'm pretty confident they're gonna do just fine. And if there's any question about it, I would actually say that just exactly what you said. It's better to get the vaccine than get COVID if you're pregnant. And the big concern with vaccines in pregnancy is usually giving a live vaccine to someone that's pregnant. But since this is not a live vaccine, that should be just fine. Just like you can get a flu shot.
That's true. Yeah. Like, in an infectious disease world, we say don't get MMR vaccine when you're pregnant. Don't get the yellow fever vaccine when you're pregnant because these are live vaccine, or don't get the chickenpox vaccine. But this is not a live vaccine, so I think that this will be very safe in pregnancy and if you're lactating.
And we have a couple more questions. There was one about human tissue. So there was no fetal tissue used in the making of this vaccine. And then there's another question: how long after bamsilizumab? So we'll get to this question as well.
The human tissue, I heard the bishops and the church have looked at both of the vaccine, Moderna and Pfizer, and they have endorsed the vaccine to say people should get the vaccine to help prevent this, bring the pandemic down. So there's some information out from the church as well.
So, and here's the question: the people who received passive antibody therapy for COVID-19. And so they say no data on safety or efficacy of the vaccination in people who have received the monoclonal antibodies. And vaccination should be deferred at least 90 days to avoid interference. So, and this is really the question of, if the antibody is sticking around, kind of disrupting it and having it not be as effective as you want it to be.
So if you got a monoclonal antibody, most likely you should wait 90 days before you get the vaccine. But the other way around. You got the vaccine and now you need the monoclonal antibodies 14 days later for something, go for it. It's fine.
Mhm.
We just don't want the other way around because we want the vaccine to work well and produce antibodies.
Right.
But you could give the monoclonal antibody after they have received vaccine. Usually, people mount a really good antibody response even after the first shot. For Pfizer, they started seeing antibodies at 7 days,
Yep.
and after 14 days, it started going up.
Right, and so just one shot
Yes.
does give good protection.
But you need both.
Yes,
Yes.
that's right.
Yes.
That's right. People with a known COVID exposure. So defer vaccination until quarantine period has ended to avoid exposing healthcare personnel or other people during the vaccination visit. So, and this is something that, you know, the people that are going to be vaccinating people, they're going to see a lot of people, and of course they're wearing PPE, but residents of healthcare settings like long-term care facilities may be vaccinated, as likely would not result in additional exposures. And people already in close contact with residents should employ appropriate infection prevention. And residents of other settings, correctional facilities, homeless shelters, may be vaccinated in order to avoid delays. And this is something, you know, as winter is coming on, one of the concerns is that homeless shelters are going to have a lot of people crammed into small areas. And, you know, the homeless shelters and correctional facilities, these people are important to vaccinate as well.
So I'm hearing from Nebraska, for example, they're going to be part of 1C rollout for you know, areas where people are congregated. But you know, with this slide, what the main thing is, if you have been exposed with COVID-19 and you have to stay home for 14 days, can you still get the vaccine? If you're staying home for 14 days, maybe you shouldn't be coming in and out of healthcare facility. But if you're already in a healthcare facility like a nursing home, then give it to them. Or if you're, you know, also the other places as well.
Right, and as far as correctional facilities go, you know, this is kind of an ethical, there are some good ethical articles that are out there about vaccination of prisoners and things like that. And part of the concern is actually the surrounding community. There was an article about Cook County Jail in Chicago, and they were looking at this big outbreak in Chicago, saying that it looked like, I think it was 1 in 8 or so, or 1 in 6 of the infections in the community actually came from people that were originally at the jail. And so it's not just about, you know, the people that are in jail, but it's about protecting, you know, the workers at the jail and the whole surrounding community. Let's see, it says, I've heard several questions about penicillin being in the vaccine, but I couldn't find anything in the explicit listings. Have you read the penicillin or other antibiotics? Oh, so we have a slide on this too.
Yeah.
What's in it and what's not in it.
And definitely antibiotics are not in it.
Right, and they actually don't have any preservatives in this.
Yes.
In the Pfizer vaccine, there are no preservatives. It's just straight, you know, 100% vaccine. So we'll show a slide on that too, showing what's in it and what's not in it. And what is your opinion on vaccination in oncology patients who have completed chemoradiation?
That's really good question, because you know, when you're immunocompromised, even if you have completed chemoradiation, you're still at higher risk. So definitely give vaccine to patients. So as we are talking about, you know, 1A rollout, if you have any healthcare workers who are immunocompromised, they should get the vaccine. You know, sometimes when you're immunocompromised, some vaccines are not as strong as in an competent patient, but it's still important to get them the vaccine so they mount an immune response.
Yes, and in those patients, the chemoradiation patients, so the concern wouldn't be them getting COVID from it or having a big reaction, especially since their immune system is down. The concern's not mounting,
you know, a really bigger, like I might mount a bigger response to antibody than an immunocompromised patient, but we still should give it to them.
Right, so those patients, I would actually say those are important patients to get the vaccine.
Exactly, because if they get the infection, they will have a bad outcome.
Right, and there's another question about how long the response will be. Will there need a revaccination?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I told you guys, I'm in the Moderna vaccine trial. So I follow up very frequently. They take a ton of blood, okay. Like 10 vials every time. But they're going to follow me for 2 years. So we know it's good for 4 months, the data we have right now, but we'll continue to follow the trial participants and we'll know how long it'll last. definitely the vaccine immunity is very strong. We just don't know yet if it's good enough for 1 year, 2 year, or maybe 5 years. Once we know that answer, we'll know, do we need to re-vaccinate, how often, how frequently.
Right, and these are called immunogenicity studies, where they'll look and they'll see how high is your antibody, and they'll like for flu, they'll say you need a certain cutoff to say that you're good, and then they'll follow it, and then they'll see how high yours go, and then as they come down, how long it takes for it to kind of wane, and that happens with with vaccines all the time. They can often wane, and sometimes it takes a good amount of time to find out that information, but with this one, it's so highly studied that I think we're going to have that information, very good information. Oh, and here, this is the similar question about underlying medical conditions. Yeah. Oh, and another one, immunocompromised people. So this goes along with the chemotherapy radiation patients, and what they said was that the concern is really them not mounting a high enough response. So the question is really, the concern is that they won't have as high a response as other people. And so that's why they have these things about talk to your doctor about it. But really, I would have a very low threshold to say yes to everybody.
Yeah. I've been saying yes to everybody. I'm like, please get your vaccine. Because, for me, I think we need to make sure our frontline workers are protected.
Let's see. And is it recommended for patients with rheumatoid arthritis or other immune disorders to get COVID vaccine? Also, what if this patient has an active infection like cellulitis and is on IV antibiotic treatment? So that's a good question. So as far as the rheumatoid arthritis, so if they're on biologics or they're on steroids and things like that, and those are the patients they'll recommend talking to their doctor, and it's probably because they'll look at it and discuss it with those patients individually.
But in my opinion, again, they're immunocompromised. They should get the vaccine.
Right.
If you have a cellulitis you're getting treatment for, that shouldn't interfere with your vaccine.
Right.
It's a two different way of how your immune system responds. So if they're stable, they should get the vaccine. If they're finishing off a 10-day course, they could get the vaccine if they're stable during that period or after the 10 day.
And that's how I see it about rheumatoid arthritis, or if they're switching medications, or if they're on a steroid burst, they can just look at what's the best time to get it, not if they should get it.
Yeah, they should definitely. Yes. Yeah.
And we discussed pregnant women, and here it says there's no data on the safety. And again, there are some women in the studies that were pregnant at the time and they didn't know it, and so they're following those, just as there are in all studies. And so they're following those patients.
And that's why, again, it's an mRNA vaccine. It's not a live vaccine. It doesn't get into your nucleus. It doesn't change your DNA. And if you're pregnant and you get COVID-19, you're at a high risk for bad COVID-19 infection. You could end up in the ICU. You could have preterm birth. Your baby can't go to the NICU. So anything we could do for our pregnant frontline workers, healthcare workers, to decrease their risk is important. So, and then the new ACOG recommendation. After this webinar, we're also going to send you some links to, including, we'll send the link to the ACOG recommendation from OBGYN, so you guys can read that as well.
And this is, just what we discussed, that as far as pregnant women getting the vaccine, what is their level of risk? And it's not vaccine or no vaccine, it's really vaccine or getting COVID. Yeah. And so if you're comparing those two, we've heard very sad reports about COVID in pregnant women, and I personally would err on the side of getting the vaccine. It's important to talk to your own healthcare person, but
yes.
I would say, as far as concerns about the vaccine, I'm not as concerned about the vaccine as I am about COVID. And people who do have fevers, they say to take some Tylenol if they're having fevers, because fevers have.
Yeah, they kind of recommend Tylenol because you can't really take ibuprofen when you're pregnant because of the baby's heart valve getting closed early. and such, but you could take Tylenol when you're pregnant if you had fevers or some discomfort. Breastfeeding and lactating females, again, it's safe. So their ACOG is recommending that they get the vaccine as well.
Oh, and this is what I was saying about reactogenicity studies about, following the antibody levels and making sure, that, and these kind of reactogenicity, there are immunogenicity and there are reactogenicity. And reactogenicity is just essentially a word that says expected, expected symptoms after getting a shot, like the pain of getting a shot, a little bit of redness at the site, a little bit of sore in the arm, things that are already expected.
Yeah, and I had that. I had redness, swelling, but it lasted only a couple of days. It did just fine. If I needed it, I took some ibuprofen or Tylenol. But again, all that is small price to pay to have protection.
And efficacy. So this is an important thing. So it's 2 doses, and after the second dose, 95%. And so, it works extremely well.
And it's important that we finish both doses to get to that 95% level. Both studies in Moderna and Pfizer, they basically looked at, did you have clinical illness? So did you get severe illness or, just clinical illness? What they found was when people who got vaccine versus the placebo, the vaccine group had next to nobody have severe COVID-19 infection. Pfizer may have had few, and Moderna had no serious infection, the vaccine group, which is really reassuring, right? That's what we want to prevent. We don't want to get COVID and end up in the ICU on a ventilator and have a bad outcome. So that's what it was able to show. But I do want people to make sure we all understand is that we can still get exposed to the COVID virus and be carriers even if we have the vaccine. They never went and checked the participant every week or twice a week to see if we are asymptomatic, are we carrying it. So until we could get at least 70% of our population vaccinated to bring down the infection, so we need to reach herd immunity, about 70% of all of us vaccinated, we still have to wear the mask, we still have to do hand hygiene, and we still have to do that social distancing.
Right, and that's the difference, exactly what you said about the difference between infection and disease. Mm-hmm. So you can have asymptomatic infection, so you can get COVID, not know it, and pass it on, versus disease where you're actually sick from it and have symptoms and the problems. And so exactly what you said, this study was looking at disease, and so it could be possible that the people that get vaccinated, they don't get the disease, but they still get an asymptomatic infection that they can spread.
We just don't know that yet, and I'm hearing they're doing more studies on that, so more information to come.
Right, and so and that's why they recommend mask wearing.
Yes.
For the question about if you get your vaccine, they still recommend masks until we figure this out. And let's see, so public health recommendations for vaccinated people.
Again, that's what we just talked about.
They still say wearing a mask, I hope you're washing your hands.
Yes.
So still kind of doing social distancing.
Avoid crowds, don't get indoor. We still need to do all the amazing things that we have been doing. And this is just another tool. Until we get 70%, we still got to keep doing the other stuff.
And contraindications and precautions. So a severe allergic reaction, anaphylaxis to any of the components, of course, they say that with every medication we ever give. Appropriate medical treatment used to manage intermediate allergic reactions must be available, of course. They didn't have any severe reactions in the study. So in the study, they looked at local reactions or systemic reactions. And the systemic reactions were fever, some people had fatigue, but they didn't have any major.
Yeah, so in the study, they never included patients who carry EpiPen around and have severe allergies. I'm sure you guys all saw that UK, there were 2 people who got severe allergy. But those patients have severe allergy that they would not have even been included in the study to begin with. So what now they're saying in US is that anybody that gets this vaccine, we have to they have to sit at the vaccination site where this for 15 minutes, and we need to keep an eye on and make sure they're okay. But if they have history of severe allergy, let's say they have a history of anaphylaxis to bee sting and they carry around an EpiPen, then we need to keep that person in there with us for 30 minutes to make sure after vaccine they do well.
Right, and really, I mean, if a majority of the population, like you're saying, a high percentage of people get it, then those people, once you reach herd immunity, those people wouldn't really be at risk if if everyone gets vaccinated. And that's really the hope, and that's really why we're trying to push for everyone to get vaccinated, because we really want people to do well and try to get back to a bit of normalcy here.
So here's a really nice chart that I think this will help everybody to know who should proceed with vaccination. So conditions, immunocompromised, pregnancy, lactation, 15 minutes, watch them. Allergies, history of food, pet, venom, environmental, history of like other allergies. All you need to do is watch for 15 minutes. They're okay. Who do you watch for a longer time? A history of severe allergic reaction to, including Pfizer vaccine, another Pfizer vaccine, history of severe allergic reaction to anaphylaxis. So these type of patients, you keep them for 30 minutes. Last, history of severe allergic reaction to anaphylaxis, any component of Pfizer vaccine, so don't give that. So let's talk about what is in the Pfizer vaccine. I think that's our next slide.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, and so there's no testing to be done before deciding if you're going to have the shot. Can mRNA vaccines change the DNA of a person? And so this was,
we talked about
that. It doesn't go to the nucleus. It only sticks around for a little bit. And this is also answers the question, what stops the body from continuing to produce the COVID-19 spike protein? And it's because our cells are continuously producing proteins.
They degrade it really fast. Yeah. We have these really fun stuff. Again, we have ribosome to make them protein, but we got RNA, another little friendly guy that'll come and eat up the mRNA.
Right, it's not there forever.
It's not there. It's very, so it goes away immediately. It doesn't stay there for that long.
Oh yeah, so here's the slide. What ingredients are in the mRNA vaccine? So it has mRNA, right? So it has this lipid bubble to help get it into where it needs to go in the cells. And then there's some salts, essentially.
Sodium, I think phosphate, some salts in there.
And then some sugar.
So it's pretty.
So this is it.
This is all that's in there. So like no preservatives. It's a pretty straightforward vaccine. And that is why that we have to keep it in a really cold freezer, right? Because it doesn't degrade because we don't have all these fancy preservatives. Yep. So this is all, so I don't know how many people are allergic to sugars and salt and the lipid.
Right.
So I think it's pretty safe for most.
Yes, and that, so it doesn't have preservatives, like vaccines in the past have had preservatives and things, but this doesn't have that. And so that's, I think they talk about refreezing and it's such like a, it doesn't preserve well, and that's why, because they wanted to just keep it very straight, and not put anything in there that really doesn't need to go in there. So what does it not have? So it doesn't have any fetal material, does not have DNA, does not have any antibiotics, no blood products, no preservatives, no gluten, egg proteins, pork products, no microchips. So this is very important. And I think, people, the anti-vax people try to grab onto any little thing they can. And so I'm really happy that this is very pure, I would say, that they don't put anything they don't need to. And so I think, I think this is very good. And then some of these are repeated. It says who should not get the COVID vaccine. And we went through that most people are able to get it. And the concern is it not being as effective as you want it to be. And they're starting studies with even younger.
Yeah.
With
so right now, Pfizer is recruiting, because I actually called to enroll my kids, but they were too young. They're recruiting kids age 12 to 15 to be in the Pfizer study currently. So because Pfizer is approved for 16 and older, so they're doing 12 to 15 now.
Let's see. There's a question. I'm assuming we do not know the type of immunity it confers, such as sterilizing immunity.
It usually works with your B cells and T cells and builds memory. How long should the side effect last? Good question. So not everybody gets side effects. Again, some people might have with the first vaccine, little soreness, little swelling, maybe a low-grade fever. You could expect a little, with the second vaccine, you might have a little bit more fever, muscle ache, fatigue, but all these symptoms last less than 24 to 48 hours. And a little bit more so with the second versus the first vaccine. So again, I think that is all worth it if you're going to get immunity towards COVID-19 infection.
Yes, and we received a question about staggering the shot in say, an emergency department. So if everyone in the emergency department, all the staff get the second shot on the same day, there's a possibility that the next day they may feel some fatigue and some fever. And so some departments are staggering it, so they don't all have fevers on the same day and feel. I mean, really, the concern in my mind is more of the whole department just going to work very tired.
Yeah. So just I think
or working with a fever.
More so with the second shot. If you want to stagger it, a few people on Monday, a few people on Tuesday, a few people on Wednesday, so you kind of space out a day in between everybody.
Oh, and we went through the people who should follow special procedures. And this is another question. Will booster doses or annual vaccines be needed? And this is what they're following. And
we just don't know yet.
Right.
But we will find out. As a trial participant, I'll be followed for 2 years.
And if a person is vaccinated against COVID, will they be able to spread the virus? And so we discussed this as well as far as asymptomatic infection and spread. And I hope we got to most questions. I think, do we have more here? So if you have any questions, please type them in. And Dr. Naz or Dr. Allen, if you have
any comments, let us know.
Any comments, or if we said anything incorrectly, please let us know. Or Sumaya, if you have any questions about how to mix it or anything, we'd be happy to send that FDA information along with the link.
Will you be presenting a similar WebEx for Moderna? We will be happy to do that. Yes. I thought 4-day grace period for the second dose. Yes.
Yes, there is a 4-day grace period. Yes, and I think that's good because, and that's with the second shot. So with a 4-day grace period, if your department all got it on the same day, the first shot, then the second shot, you can spread out the second shot like that. Yeah.
Will these slides? Yes, we're going to send you the slides and also about 3 or 4 really good links to sites, FDA, ACOG sites where you could get more information.
Oh, and here's this. Oh, this is a good question. 7 or 8 people developed Bell's palsy during both trials. Should people with a history of Bell's palsy be cautious? So
we actually talked about it before the webinar.
Mm-hmm.
So when this started coming up, I went and looked at what is the natural occurrence of Bell's palsy. Bell's palsy happens in a general population about 10 to 15 person per 100,000. So in this vaccine group, where they had 44,000 and 30,000 in each of the study, they had Bell's palsy about one study, I think about 6, another one 4. So it's really hard to make anything of it. It's less than the general population, and we expect to see this type of Bell's palsy in general population. So I'm not sure about this. If you have had Bell's palsy, I think this would be something you talk to your primary care doctor and kind of weigh the benefits versus risks and then decide.
Right. Yeah, I think that's, and they were in both trials. Right. So those are the, if you've had a history of it or if you'd like to talk to I would ask your doctor about it and see what they say. Part of it might have to do with severity and your personal history and the risks that you have.
But also to remember, it naturally occurs too.
Right, and versus COVID in your specific situation.
Just to confirm, we should give employees second vaccine 19 to it's 70 to 21 days, and then you have 4 days in between, right?
Let's see, 19 to 20 days. Oh, you mentioned day 17 to 21, which is acceptable. So they actually say, right, there is a bit of a grace period there, and if you get it after, especially if you get it after like all vaccines, that's fine. They would still consider it a complete series. I would try not to get it reduce that time, but actually extending it out, like I would say would be okay, but I would try to follow what they did in the study as much as possible.
Well, thank you. And then it sounds like you guys would like us to do a webinar on the Moderna vaccine. I think we might get an EUA sometime this week. So once that we have all that information, we'll be happy to do that.
Yes, and I'm getting my vaccine in 1 hour, so I have to leave here and make it to get my shot. But I am very excited this shot is here. I am very excited. You know, my parents can't wait. My parents signed up to be in the experimental group as well, but they weren't selected, and they really want the shot, and so I'm excited to get the shot and see my parents.
And I honestly, like, we want to do the right thing as infectious disease doctors, and I know with all this information, it's all new, but we trust the vaccine. I've gotten this, Dr. Horn is getting it. And I think, you know, with all this information, you guys could make a good decision for yourself as well.
Yes, and I kind of think, you know, I think back on when vaccines first came out and what people must have been saying at that time. And that's kind of when I hear people say that they're worried about this or that, I kind of think, you know, in the future, when we look back on this and, you know, when we tell our kids about it and say people were worried about their DNA being altered and people were worried about these different things, I kind of wonder how we're going to look back on it and think about it. But I think, you know, the studies are there, and, you know, I'm a big believer in these studies, and they look very rigorous and they look very good. And so, you know, if I look at that, you know, I'm going to get it today.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you all.
So thank you everybody for coming, and please send us. So we'll send out links with the what we referenced, and so you can look at it and see it. There's also there's a good article also that says, where am I in line? And you can put in the county, you know, what county you're in, your age, any special population that you're in, and it will estimate where you are in line. And it's actually very good. So we'll send some links with this information, and please, you know, give us feedback as far as what you'd like us to discuss in the future, or any questions you have. I hope we addressed everybody's questions.
Thank you all.
All
Have
right.
a great day.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.